Hello. Welcome to week 23, Humanities. We're going to go through your memory work to start with. As we begin, don't forget to turn in your week 22 HLAs by photo to your academic dean. When we do memory work, we're going to start by saying ready, begin, so that you can be at home saying the recitations and all the other memory work out loud with me. Ready, begin. Creativity is approaching a need, task, or an idea from a new perspective. I use my talents for good. I see things from more than one perspective. I use principles to solve problems. I learn all I can. I look for new ways to be a person of character. Ready, begin. The Scientific Method Chant by Sarah Lloyd. Identify the question. Identify the question. Gather information. Gather information. Form a hypothesis. Form a hypothesis. Test the hypothesis. Test the hypothesis. Analyze the data. Analyze the data. Form a conclusion. Form a conclusion. Math cheers. Ready, begin. People learn to like math, and I'm on that positive path. Mathematical thinking is if-then thinking and helps me in everyday life. Visualizing math helps me see the way each problem is supposed to be. Checking my work again is better for my brain. 6 reasons people miss math problems. Ready, begin. Visualizing, so I will imagine the math. Messiness, so I will write neatly. Reading, so I will carefully read the whole problem. Simple math, so I will watch for my mistakes. Transferring, so I will double check what I write. Concepts, and then I will read it again or ask for help. Timeline dates and events. Ready, begin. Prehistory, first evidence of human migration from Africa to Eurasia. Stone Age, figures painted in Lascaux, France caves. 10,000 BCE, Mesopotamians developed agriculture in Fertile Crescent. 8,000 BCE, South Americans developed cave paintings, textiles, and agriculture in Peru. 3,200 BCE, Sumerians invented cuneiform writing. 3,000 BCE, Pharaoh Menes unified Upper and Lower Kingdoms of Egypt. 1700 BCE, Hammurabi compiled first known law code in Babylon. 1339 BCE, King Tutankhamun entombed in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. 1300 BCE, epic story of Gilgamesh recorded early Mesopotamian culture. 1250 BCE, Greeks fought Trojan War in Anatolia. 1122 BCE, Zhou dynasty invoked mandate of heaven, beginning longest rule of China. 1050 BCE, Phoenicians devised phonetic alphabet. 776 BCE, Greeks held first recorded Olympic Games. 753 BCE, legendary twins Romulus and Remus founded Rome. 587 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar II captured Jerusalem and destroyed its temple. 563 BCE, Prince Siddhartha, later known as Buddha, born in India. 539 BCE, Babylon fell to Persian king Cyrus the Great. 522 BCE, Chinese philosopher Confucius initiated teaching of ethics. 509 BCE, Roman Republic replaced monarchy. 508 BCE, Athenians instituted first democracy. 500 BCE, Greek mathematician Pythagoras proposed round earth theory. 480 BCE, classical period began, influenced by Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. 330 BCE, Alexander the Great's conquests spread Greek culture into Egypt and Asia. 221 BCE, Qin dynasty began constructing Great Wall along China's northern border. 44 BCE, Julius Caesar assassinated in Rome on the Ides of March. 27 BCE, Octavian installed as first Roman emperor. 3 BCE, Jesus Christ born in Bethlehem, Judea. 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupted, destroying Pompeii. 476 CE, Western Roman Empire collapsed. Now we'll do our recitation. Ready, begin. Horatius by Thomas Babington Macaulay. But the consul's brow was sad, and the consul's speech was low, and darkly looked he at the wall, and darkly at the foe. Their van will be upon us before the bridge goes down, and if they once might win the bridge, what help to save the town? Then out spoke brave Horatius, the captain of the gate. To every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods, and for the tender mother who dandled him to rest, and for the wife who nurses his baby at her breast, and for the holy maidens who feed the eternal flame to save them from false Sextus that wrought the deed of shame? Hew down the bridge, Sir Consul, with all the speed ye may. I, with two more to help me, will hold the foe in play. In yon straight path 1,000 may well be stopped by 3. Now who will stand on either hand and keep the bridge with me? Then outspake Spurius Lartius, a Romnian proud was he. Lo, I will stand at thy right hand and keep the bridge with thee. And outspake strong Herminius, of Titian blood was he. I will abide on thy left side and keep the bridge with thee. Horatius, quoth the consul, as thou sayest, so let it be. And straight against that great array forth went the dauntless 3. For Romans in Rome's quarrel spared neither land nor gold, nor son nor wife, nor limb nor life in the brave days of old. Then none was for a party, and then all were for the state. Then the great man helped the poor, and the poor man loved the great. Then lands were fairly portioned, then spoils were fairly sold. The Romans were like brothers in the brave days of old. We're going to do our geography song for Northern Africa. And you can find this resource in your Google Drive also, but I'm just going to sing it one time here. Ready, begin. Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Canary Islands, and Western Sahara. These are the countries of Northern Africa, south of the Mediterranean Sea, home of the Great Sahara Desert and the pyramids. Welcome to week 23, character. These are the I wills and the idea that we have this month. Ironically, we of course are in quarantine, and a lot of us are having to learn to be more creative and to show creativity or use our already creative talents and abilities to do awesome things during this time. So if you'll look, I will use my talents for good. I've changed to I use my talents for good. And I will see things from more than one perspective has changed to I see things from more than one perspective. Because we're transitioning to the idea that it's somewhere in the future and it's actually happening now. So I now use principles to solve problems. Right now, I learn all I can. And right now, I look for new ways to be a person of character. And keeping our mind focused like that is going to really help us during this time of temporary time of being in quarantine, but none of us know how long it's going to last. So it's just a different kind of situation, and creativity is going to really help us out. Here are some fun ideas. I know that you probably have seen many, many more ideas for being creative. The top 3 on the left of your screen, I think it's your left, are all bottle cap. They all are using bottle tabs off the top of a soda can. Somebody made a purse, a belt, and earrings out of pop tabs, which I thought was very creative. Many of us can make this, take a can and change it into a planter and grow some awesome seeds. It's Oregon, so you can just about grow everything here. And there are many creative ideas you have at home that are probably keeping you occupied during this time. So I just appreciate all of that. And if you have something you're doing creatively, please share it with your teacher. I know your academic dean would love to hear all about what you're up to. One thing I know you're doing is thinking of ways to solve problems. And if you have something you're doing, we'd love to hear about that. And I know for Dialectic 1, our class is sharing some of these together. We're trying to make sure we can start communicating as a class. How can you show creativity doing chores at home? How can you show creativity showing others appreciation? How can you show creativity while quarantined at home? These are some great topics. And of course, during a video, you can always pause. So throughout this whole video, I'll give you opportunities to pause the video and then stop and just discuss this. And this is a good question to discuss now, or you could discuss it tonight at dinner or breakfast or lunch, sometime when you guys are all together in the house. Welcome to week 23, Humanities. This is our art, music, and timeline date section. First of all, we already talked about music appreciation last month. We're going to be going more in depth with that. And then the link is right here. I can start playing a little bit of it just so you can hear it. I think it'll come up for me. It's not coming up for me. Making sure I don't think the sound is linked very well. You can go in and listen to that. There's also a YouTube here that you're able to go and watch an orchestra perform that piece. And this a piece is called Adagio of Spartacus and Phrygia. And that is a beautiful piece that was written in 1954, not too long ago. And you can listen for different instruments, making sure that your ears are trained to hear the different violin, cello, flute, oboe, maybe some cymbals, snare drums, trumpets, and listen to that as a family. For art appreciation, we are working on looking at this Roman. We don't know who actually was the artist behind this, and we do know that it's a marble copy of a bronze original, and he's called the Dying Gaul. And as you can tell, he has a rope around his neck, which was actually made of metal, and he has a sword beside him, and he was someone who was a gladiator or a Celtic warrior. So we are studying more about him in our art section. I think that's next week. Our timeline date this week is we're going to focus on is 330 BCE. Alexander the Great's conquest spread Greek culture into Egypt and Asia. And this is a fact. We know Alexander the Great's conquest did spread Greek culture. Here he is on his horse Bucephalus, and he was in love with his horse, and he named a city after his horse eventually. We'll have lots more to learn about him. First of all, what do you remember about Alexander the Great? And this is a good chance to pause and discuss. And you can I know we've talked about him a little bit. First of all, who was his father? Pause if you would like to. I'm going to give you the answer. His father was the king of Macedonia, Philip. And where did they live? Macedonia, where is that? Macedonia is a country in northern Greece, not a city-state. It was actually just a country in northern Greece. And I gave you the answer. Who was his tutor? We talked about it last week. Alexander the Great was tutored by someone famous, Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle. Do you remember which one? Aristotle. And which country's culture did he respect and love? Very much. Alexander loved Greece's language, its history, its gods, everything about Greece, and he wanted to share it with other places. Turns out the Greek people didn't like him so much, but he did love their culture. So I went ahead and shared some videos here. A fun idea is to do stop motion videos with Legos. And there's some videos showing stories about Alexander the Great in stop motion Legos. And there's also a YouTube that's a little bit cut off, but you can access it on the slideshow. And that one is just a good overview of Alexander the Great as well. There are so many things on YouTube about Alexander the Great. So I left some here. If you're interested in extra links, and just wanted to make sure you had access to those. Let me just talk about Alexander for a couple of minutes. First of all, in this picture, we see Aristotle teaching Alexander the Great. Aristotle's the one in the blue robe and toga, and Alexander the Great is the one who was dressed in red in royal colors. And this is not an actual picture, just so you know. Today we're going to see actual pictures that were sculptures or art that was done at the time of Alexander the Great. This is not one of those pictures. This is an artist's depiction of that event later in time. So like I said, his father was Philip, and he was in Macedonia, and he was schooled by Aristotle. He learned when he was in school Greek language, history, religion, and Homer. And as you guys all know, because we read the Odyssey and the Iliad, a version of that, those stories were the same stories that Alexander the Great was listening to when he was taught school, which I think that's really cool. You guys were taught something that to understand about something that Alexander the Great was taught as truth. So very interesting. He eventually came to decide his goal was to teach everyone in the whole world to love Greek culture. And he was trained to be a ruler and a warrior and a leader from the very, very beginning. He was setting out to do that. Here's a good map. Check it out. Look at all the different colors on it. Up at the bottom, I want to make sure you see those three fingers. We call those the three fingers of in Greece because they're easy to see. The island down there, or the isthmus, is leading you down to the peninsula at the bottom of Greece, and that has three fingers at the bottom of it. We're going to use that landmark later in the lecture today. And then if you go up to the orange color, that's Macedon, and that is at the time was an actual country. And Philip II died, and when he died, Alexander became king at 20 years old. And yes, it does say on the slides, his father was actually assassinated, which was something, if you wanted to take over a ruler, you killed them. We don't do that here in America, but that is something they did back then. And this map that you're looking at is from that time period before the Common Era, 330 years before the Common Era. So we're going to be talking about time a lot this week. And so remember that at 330 BCE, that is kind of a date in your mind today. So on the map, you can see which areas were independent of Macedon. Macedon did not have control over the yellow area or the purple area at the time, just only under themselves. But after Alexander became the leader and he started conquering everything around him, those yellow and purple areas were taken over by Alexander. The Greeks ended up, like I said, hating Alexander, and yet he still loved their culture and he wanted it very much. And so they fought him, and he went back and forth with his own people. But at the end of the day, Alexander is, we have resources that say he never lost a battle. Now, to be honest, a lot of the resources are biased, and they want to praise Alexander the Great. And of course, Alexander the Great was the leader at the time. So we don't know the truth, but we think it's pretty close to the truth that he never lost a battle. This allowed conquered people to rule themselves. And those conquered people, when they got to rule themselves, were loyal to him. But if they weren't loyal to him, what do you think happened? If they were not going to be loyal to Alexander the Great, boom, it was death. They just got killed. There was no choices. There was no big jail system. And so he wanted people to rule themselves and also be loyal to him. But because of this, he was one of the most successful military commanders ever. And we'll go on to see what else he did. Okay, so this orange area, I'm going to kind of point an area out to you. Look on the map, and can you find those three fingers on the Greek peninsula? They're in green. They have the word Athens right above them. They're really small. And that is where, and then up above that's Macedonia. That is where, I guess I can do it with my mouse. That is where Alexander the Great started off, and then he did not go west. He went which direction? East, and he ended up taking over all of these areas. And at the time, that was called the known world. He did know that there was China. He wanted to keep going to China. We'll talk about that in a minute. And he ended up building himself 70 cities. That is just insane. A lot of cities. And he didn't live very long. So he did this campaign where he just took an army and went city to city to city to city and took them over or conquered them, made them loyal to him. He did this all the way over to a place called the Indus River. The Indus River is on the far east of this picture, and that is the start of India and Pakistan as we know it today. So that was quite a big deal. He wanted to go to China, but he ended up dying in 323 BCE. Remember, this started in 330, and for 7 years he just went forward, forward, forward. And so 323 sounds like a smaller number, but it's actually farther ahead in time. We don't know if he died because he was sick or because he was poisoned. We don't have clear evidence of that. It was pretty common for leaders to get poisoned back then, but also he had a lot of battle injuries. So battle injuries will also take their toll on you. I put a big positive sign and a big negative sign on this screen. So maybe as a family, you guys can have some back and forth discussion. What are the positives of what Alexander the Great did, and what are the negative things Alexander the Great did? Well, first of all, as a positive, we know that it ended up really changing things when he spread the Greek culture over that whole area on the map here in orange. That was a huge deal. He ended up bringing the arts and the literature in the stories of the Greek gods and Roman gods. He brought all of those things, government and economics and money and coins, all the way that far east. So that spreading of Greek influence was a big deal. And he also united the cultures, not perfectly, but generally speaking, he did unite the cultures, which later made way for the Roman Empire. So it was a big deal. But for the negatives, we know that there were people who were not writing their stories down at that time in that area that he conquered. And in any of those cities that you're looking at had a culture, and he destroyed a ton of it. He killed people, and he took away the chance for us here in 2020 to know if those how those people would have operated. How did they deal with art? How did they deal with music? How did they deal with government and economics? And did they have special coins? And we don't get to know those things very well because Alexander did destroy them. There are lots of parts to culture: literature, art, theater, music, money, medicine was a big one, government, language, dance. And these parts of culture, he spread his view on, and we have bits and pieces of the other cultures, but not as much as we have of his. So that is something that to talk about. You know, when cultures go and conquer like that, what happens to the people that they did conquer, and what are the benefits and what are the negative things that happen there? Okay, welcome to week 23, Humanities, for the recitation portion. First of all, at school, at ACE, when you're in group classes and you're in maybe grammar A, B, C, I think in grammar D, I'm not sure, the teacher will say a phrase from the poem and ask the students to write it down without seeing it. And that's called dictation, taking dictation, and that idea is really important. We see people do that all the time when they're listening to speakers. I know I do it if I'm listening to a speaker or a podcast or something that I enjoy. Even if I'm talking to a friend, if they say something, I can capture it in my mind and then record it with my writing. And that's a skill, and we like to build that. That's one of the classical skills, basics. And so today I'm going to do that. You can use a piece of paper. You can write this down. This is absolutely optional. You don't have to save it or keep it, but learning how to do this is going to be very helpful. So today I'm going to say, I can't remember what I typed out. If at once, if he And if he once might win the bridge, what hope to save the town? So I'll erase that again just so we can make sure and have a chance to pause it if you need to. And if he once might win the bridge, what hope to save the town? The younger students would just write the last part, what hope to save the town? And that's something you can work with your student on as a parent if you're interested in doing that. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so we have a special guest today. I asked my daughter Cedar to come in and read you a story. One of the things I've been learning as we transition to online learning is that the benefit that we have in class of sitting with books and having the teacher read while the students follow along with their finger is does not have to be lost. We can recapture that by having me put the words up here on the screen, and then I colored the red part, and that's the part that we will read out loud. And the students should be following along and reading out loud also. So when you're home, this first part would begin with Once Upon a Time. And when the reader, who is going to be Cedar, says Once Upon a Time, then you can say Once Upon a Time and read right along with her. And there will be several pages of it. You can pause if you need a break and go back if you want to do this later. But we're going to read the story of Horatius at the Bridge.
All right. So, once upon a time, there was a war between the Roman people and the Etruscans, who lived in the towns on the other side of the Tiber River. Porsenna, the king of the Etruscans, raised a great army and marched toward Rome. The city had never been in such great danger. See, there's a picture of the bridge and the battle that was going on right on top of the bridge. The Romans did not have very many fighting men at the time, and they knew that they were not strong enough to meet the Etruscans in open battle. So they kept themselves inside of their walls and set guards to watch the roads. One morning, the army of Porsenna was seen coming over the hills from the north. There were thousands of horsemen and footmen, and they were marching straight toward the wooden bridge which spanned the river at Rome. "What shall we do?" asked the white-haired fathers who made the laws for the Roman people. "If they once gain the bridge, we cannot hinder them from crossing, and then what hope will there be for the town?" Now, among the guards at the bridge, there was a brave man named Horatius. He was on the farther side of the river, and when he saw that the Etruscans were so near, he called out to the Romans who were behind him. "Hew down the bridge with all the speed that you can," he cried. "I, with the 2 men who stand beside me, will keep the foe at bay." Then, with their shields before them and their long spears in their hands, the 3 brave men stood in the road and kept back the horsemen whom Porsenna had sent to take the bridge. On the bridge, the Romans hewed away at the beams and the posts. Their axes rang, the chips flew fast, and I can't read because it has the thing on it.
I know.
Okay, hide. And soon it trembled and was ready to fall. come back, and save your lives," they cried to Horatius and the 2 who were with him. But just then Porsenna's horsemen dashed toward them again. "Run for your lives," said Horatius to his friends. "I will keep the road." They turned and ran back across the bridge. They had hardly reached the other side when there was a crashing of beams and timbers. The bridge toppled over to one side and then fell with a great splash into the water. When Horatius heard the sound, he knew that the city was safe. With his face still toward Porsenna's men, he moved slowly backward till he stood on the river's bank. See, there's a picture of Horatius. A dart thrown by one of Porsenna's soldiers put out his left eye, but he did not falter. He cast his spear at the foremost horseman, and then he turned quickly around. He saw the white porch of his own home among the trees on the other side of the stream. And he spake to the noble river that rolls by the walls of Rome, "O Tiber, Father Tiber, to whom the Romans pray, A Roman life, a Roman's arms, take thou in charge today. He leapt into the deep, swift stream. He still had his heavy armor on, and when he sank out of sight, no one thought he would ever be seen again. But he was a strong man and the best swimmer in Rome. The next minute he rose, halfway across the river and safe from the spears and darts that the soldiers hurled after him. There he is. Boom. Soon he reached the farther side where his friends stood ready to help him. Shout after shout greeted him as he climbed upon the bank. Then Porsenna's men shouted also, for they had never seen a man so brave and strong as Horatius. He had kept them out of Rome, but he had done a deed which they could not help but praise. As for the Romans, they were very grateful to Horatius for having saved their city. They called him Horatius Cocles, which means the one-eyed Horatius, because he had lost an eye in defending the bridge. They caused a fine statue of brass to be made in his honor, and they gave him as much land as he could plow around in one day. And for hundreds of years afterwards, with weeping and with laughter, still was the story told, how well Horatius kept the bridge in the brave days of old. There you go.
Thank you, Cedar. And here is a great artist depiction of that. Of course, we don't have a real picture of what happened that day, but we do get to see what artists thought about it later on. This is a map of the city. You're looking at it from the sky, straight down. And the idea is that you're looking at different places, temples, forums. The Roman Forum is here. All the words are in Latin. And these big buildings are actually on hills. They're the 7 hills around Rome. And the wall that applies is the innermost one, called the Servian wall. Sorry about the sound. The Servian wall. And the bridge is clearly marked here with blue. And that is the bridge in the middle of town where Horatius was preserving the bridge. So, pretty cool. Welcome to week 23, Humanities. We're talking this week more about Rome, of course, this whole term about Rome. And this week we're talking about Caesar, Julius Caesar. First of all, for the older students, you should know that we take Cornell notes, dialectic 1 and up, typically. Of course, this is optional, but just so you have a kind of a placeholder to remind yourself, yes, Cornell notes are still a hope people can do when they're home watching this video. So our first topic, Julius Caesar. He is depicted here in a bust where someone carved marble, and we have pictures of him. They're original. That is a primary source because that picture is of an actual thing that was actually made at the actual time of Julius Caesar. He started out as a powerful Roman general, and he was elected by the Senate as dictator for life in 46 BCE. Now think for a second, the date 46 BCE, that is coming sooner to where we are today than that 330 date that we talked about back talking about Alexander the Great. So if Alexander the Great, 300s, and then you zoom forward about 300 years to 46 BCE. So Julius Caesar lived about 300 years after Alexander the Great. And he's living in Rome, where Rome is actually an empire now. It's going to soon become an empire. And that's because of that work that Alexander the Great did 300 years earlier. You can say it was good or bad, but either way it happened, that Alexander the Great united that area, and here we are with Julius Caesar. He's ruling like a king. He's making changes to Rome. He's putting people in power that are his friends. He's not letting people vote for the right person for the job. He is putting people in power. That is something we're not supposed to be doing here in America. He built new buildings in Rome and kind of refreshed things. He improved the temples and made new temples. And one major thing that we have today that he had is that he changed our calendar to 365 days per year. That's called the Julian calendar. And he said 3 years will be 365 days, and then that fourth year we'll have a leap year where we have an extra day. Mm-hmm. So here's a picture, a terrible sight. It's an artist's picture. It's not what really happened, but it's approximately what happened. Here we have people in the Senate, and Julius Caesar sitting there, or sitting there in the middle. See the sword falling out of his hand. Cassius and Brutus are plotting to kill him. And when he did get killed and Julius Caesar got stabbed, he said, "Et tu, Brutus," which means "you too, Brutus," which means he was saying, "I knew people were out to kill me, but you too? Are you really here to kill me also?" Yes. And why was that? Well, let's go back a little bit. Uh, Julius Caesar was going to have an heir to the throne, and people were fighting over who that was going to be. Should it be Octavian or Mark Antony? Octavian was the legal heir because he was his nephew, and because of that, Octavian changed his name to Augustus Caesar, which you may actually see that in biblical literature because that's Augustus, the same Augustus Caesar. And then Mark Antony is a famous general at the time. He's also relative to Julius Caesar, and he really wants to be the leader, and he thought he should be the dictator. But the two of them did at the time agree on a truce. And then we have the next topic, Cleopatra. So Cleopatra is going to be like the next layer of the story. She has alliances with Caesar and with Mark Antony, and they're kind of conflicting. She was kind of playing both sides of the story. First of all, in the green words, I'm going to talk about Julius Caesar, and then we'll move on to the orange and the blue words. Julius Caesar started off by going to Egypt. He fell in love with the queen of Egypt at the time, Cleopatra. Everybody say Cleopatra. That's a fun word to say. And he helped her become pharaoh by the end of this. And he did have a child with her, which is really important because if you're an emperor and you have a child, especially a male child, at that time, that male child was supposed to be the heir. So that was going to come into the story a little bit later. Now we know Cleopatra in the orange words. Cleopatra was born a princess of Egypt, but she was also a Greek. And her father was Pharaoh Ptolemy. It's not P Ptolemy, it's Ptolemy the seventh, and so he passed down the Egypt power over Egypt to her. She became a queen at 18 years old and married her younger brother Ptolemy the eighth to make this deal of being pharaoh or being the leader the right thing, and had to marry her younger brother, which we would never do today. Ptolemy the Eighth was 10 years old when they got married, so obviously it wasn't a regular marriage. It was just kind of to unite power. And so they ended up having this Ptolemy dynasty. This was established by the Greek ruler Alexander the Great also. And in Alexander the Great kind of thought he could be involved with this Ptolemy dynasty, but then when Ptolemy the Eighth was a 10-year-old, it didn't matter so much. But when he grew older, he wanted to force Cleopatra out, which is where the rest of the story comes in. Here's a little bit of pictures we see. We see this Egyptian perspective on Cleopatra in this bust of Ptolemy. Actually, that doesn't look like Ptolemy. Maybe it is. And oh, okay. Cleopatra, let's move forward a little bit to 48 BCE. Cleopatra sneaks into Caesar's palace because she's hidden inside of a rolled up carpet. And she gets in there to meet with Caesar and she says, I would like to help you, I would like you to help me win back the throne. Now, I'm kind of simplifying the story, obviously, but this is basically her going to Caesar and begging, can you help me win back the throne? And Caesar says, sure. And he goes out and defeats Ptolemy's army at the Battle of the Nile. And during that battle, her younger brother, remember she had been married to her younger brother who tried to kick her out, he drowned in the Nile River, and then Cleopatra became the ruler of Egypt. So one fun thing is to back up a little bit. If you want to, you can go get some stuffed animals, and this really works great with Julius Caesar stuffed animal, Cleopatra stuffed animal, and then eventually you'll need some other stuffed animals as well, Ptolemy, and just kind of remember how this works, and because all these characters are confusing sometimes. Um, so then that's in 48. And remember, let's just review what happened. Cleopatra sneaks into Caesar's palace, says, "Please help me." Caesar says, "Okay, I'll help you." Goes back down to Egypt, has a battle of the Nile, and ends up killing Ptolemy in the Nile River. Cleopatra is the ruler of Egypt. Julius Caesar's the ruler over Rome, and now we have this big empire. We'll move forward a few years. Remember, we're going closer to the time we live in when we subtract when we're before the Common Era. Cleopatra is now meeting Mark Antony and falling in love with him. And why is this? Well, by 41, remember who's dead? Julius Caesar already died. So Cleopatra's guy she was in love with, Julius Caesar, he's gone, he's dead, he got stabbed. And Mark Antony is now the one she's in love with. Okay. She still wants that power, so they form another military alliance, and we can't just blame her. I mean, it's a whole system of how they operated back then. Formed another military alliance against another of Rome's leaders, Octavian. So remember, Mark Antony and Octavian were going to be friends. They had a truce going on. Cleopatra comes in, tries to connect with Mark Antony, and then they go against Octavian. Okay, Octavian is a legal heir of Julius Caesar's throne at the time, and so Mark Antony and Cleopatra they're going to have to fight pretty hard to take that throne over from Octavian. So Cleopatra wanted her son to be the actual heir, right? The ruler, because she had a child with Julius Caesar, and she wants that child to take over Octavian's throne. So she goes in hopes that Mark Antony can help her. So here's just an artist's depiction of that, just to kind of get you some ideas in your head. This is on the Nile River. You see the boats there. You see the Egyptians around. And here's Cleopatra with the skin of some animal around her, and Mark Antony peeking in at her. So this was a painting done in 1883, obviously not during the actual time, but this is some ideas of what that they thought might have happened. Okay, so back to the story. Cleopatra and Mark Antony combine their armies. They're going to fight together. They're going to try to go defeat Octavian. Okay, they go to a battle. They do defeat Octavian, but then they have to retreat down to Egypt. Cleopatra ends up down in Egypt, and it's known as she is the very last emperor or pharaoh of Egypt. And here's that bust of her. I don't think that one's ancient, but it might be. And that's the story of Cleopatra. So that is a huge thing. She had Caesar. Caesar dies. She goes to Antony. They take over Octavian. She doesn't get to have the whole empire, but she does get to be the last pharaoh of Egypt. Very abbreviated. You're welcome to look all that up on YouTube and find some healthy, reliable YouTube channels, like biography or something like that, where you can see the real story with more details and more support. But that's a fast overview. You can act that out with stuffed animals. It's kind of fun. Okay, this is a new topic, Pax Romana. You can say that, Pax Romana, not Pax Romana. That's us up here with our Pacific Northwest accent, but say Pax Romana. That means the peace of Rome, or Rome's peace. In this coin that you're seeing here was one of the coins that was circulated during the actual time of the Pax Romana. Now, this was a time during Rome's history that went from before the Common Era, before Christ, past when Christ was born, to AD or CE, Common Era, 180. So it's 30 plus 180, so 210 years of peace there. So this was a 210-year time period of peace and prosperity. Julius Caesar did get initiated, um, initiated this time. Julius Caesar was not alive back then, so yeah, I think that last note's a mistake. But here we are looking at a map. What is this map of? The Roman Empire. At the end of its height and its glory, and the biggest time that it was a whole empire. This is in AD 180, or Common Era 180 AD. And so, as you can tell, the Roman Empire goes all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean. It goes all the way over toward India and Persia. This is a 200-year time of peace, a really big deal. The Roman Empire was still fighting other people, but in their empire, they had new amazing technology, agriculture, science, the arts, and things were just exploding. And we today can look back and see the art that they did and the writings that they did, because they actually wrote them down and we have them in writing. It was very civilized. Life was generally very comfortable, and that's why it was kind of a golden age. So, does this mean that there was no war going on at all? No, this does not mean there was no war. Rome was still fighting, Rome was still conquering. How do you think they got that big? They were still fighting and conquering, but they were stable, and being a stable empire was new. People knew that an emperor would run their society for them and help them out. People knew that Roman legion soldiers would take care of the wars. People didn't have to worry about being conquered. They could focus on art and poetry and inventions. And so the idea of a Pax Romana, that stable empire, meant that people were generally more comfortable and secure. So here I have a pie graph. In this pie graph, the red is the biggest part of the pie graph. And when you are worrying about where you're going to, get food, when you're worrying about if your child is going to get sick because they have to stay outside with no shelter, you are worrying most of the time about your food, your shelter, and your security. And this is all you got. You only have one pie graph in your life. So there's not a lot of room for new ideas or art or literature. And those just take up a small slice of your life. Most of your life is spent on food, shelter, and security. But when you have solid, secure home where your food is consistent and your security is consistent, you're not worried about violence, you're not worried about another people coming in and attacking you or danger inside your home, then you can switch those. And in the red section, that big section, you can have lots of new ideas and inventions. And the worry in your heart and your mind and the attention you have to use for food, shelter, and security is very small. And so this is something we see in societies. If we can take care of food, shelter, security, generally that means that the majority of the people will go forward and do really cool inventions, art, literature, government innovations. Obviously, we live in an age of technology that could not have happened if all of our great computer people of the past were worrying about where they were going to get their food. So this is what we saw in Roman history. This is why we had a Pax Romana. Next topic. Let's talk about Virgil, Horace, Ovid. Sorry. Let's talk about Virgil, Horace, and Ovid. Say those words with me. Virgil, Horace, and Ovid. The most famous guys here, they are the most famous writers of Roman literature. Now, I would love to say that there were female Roman females who wrote literature, but that is not the case. We do not see them very much at all. In Rome, that was not a very common thing. So, unfortunately, we have to just talk about the guys. But they were really substantial. They did some really fantastic poetry, and they all had different kind of concepts. So, here we are in the picture. The bottom one is Virgil. He says, "Come what may, all bad fortune is to be conquered by endurance." And he had a certain personality. Then we go to Horace, and you see a picture of Horace, and then Ovidius is what's written at the bottom of his statue there, and these are the three we're gonna kind of main writers of the time. So first, let's talk about Virgil. Virgil lived from 70 BC to 19 BC. Remember, 70 is far, far ago, and 19 is closer to our time. And he was known for writing the Aeneid, which is what you guys just read. That was the one that told the story of the Trojan heroes, Aeneas. And the Aeneid's basic ideas, you guys probably know, were that he wrote an epic, which was a big poem, that tells the story of Prince Aeneas of Troy. But here's the thing, guys. It was originally written as propaganda. It was supposed to try to brainwash people into justifying why Rome was conquering all these other lands. Why would Rome conquer all these other lands? Well, the stories that Virgil told how Aeneas founded Rome and the gods wanted him to go out and conquer all these other places. And then people were like, okay, sounds good to me. I'm completely exaggerating right now, but that's pretty much what the general idea was. That's about Virgil. Now let's talk about Horace. Oh, wait. First, Virgil had a really fun saying that I love, which was carpe diem. Everybody say carpe diem. He was known to say this, seize the day, or actually pluck the day, is what it means in Latin. And we had an event last year called Carpe Diem, or seize the day, I guess. And the idea of really trying to take advantage of every day, I thought was kind of important because here we are in quarantine. So now we have Horace. Horace lived from 65 BC to 8 BC. So remember, 65 was a long time ago. 8 is closer to our time right now. And he was known for writing lyric poems where they had lyrics, just like we have lyrics. And they were called the odes. And most of his writing was devoted to praising the reign of Augustus, which we know we were talking about earlier, Octavius. He wrote this awesome line, "We are but dust and shadow," which was kind of a humble way of saying, from the earth we come and back to the earth we go. And you can still read these writings today. In fact, I should mention our advanced placement Latin class reads Virgil, Horace, and Ovid's Latin in classes every year. Here's some writing of Horace. You can actually look back and see someone has written on it, but these are primary things. We can go back and see exactly what they wrote. So Ovid is the next one. He lived 43 BCE all the way to 17 AD, which was Anno Domini, which means after Christ, which is the Common Era. So 43 before Christ, or before the Common Era, to 17 AD, or the Common Era. So that time period was, only only 60 years he only lived. But his most famous work was called Metamorphosis, and it was the history of the world from creation to when Julius Caesar was made a god. So, of course, these poems were very romantic. He was actually most famous for his love poems. He kind of twisted things into romantic language. The first thing every morning, here's a quote from him, the first thing every morning before you arise, say out loud, I believe, I believe, I believe, 3 times. I thought that was kind of a funny quote because I think we say some things like that these days here in 2020. Here's another fantastic quote from him. Be patient and tough. Someday this pain will be useful to you. Which, isn't that a fantastic encouragement during this time as well? That is our lecture for Humanities. We're going to be talking more about art and music next week and investigate those some more. And we hope you have a fantastic week. Make sure you go back to your home linked assignments and check out what you have due. Some of you are able to do more than others. That's just what we expect. So let us know if we can help you with anything during this time.